Welcome to Under the Daisies, where I tally up the victims in whatever I feel like. I am Alp Clownmiser the 36, and today on the chopping block is the first volume of I Hate Fairyland, a comic book series whose first issue released on October 14th of 2015.
Oh god, this series is 10 years old now.
Anyway, I Hate Fairyland is a dark comedy published by Image Comics, with gratuitous bloodshed, gore, and death happening to cute and cartoonish storybook creatures. My favorite part of the entire series is the art, with characters being so expressive that you'd think their faces would get stuck like that. The origin of the series begins with Marvel of all places, namely from the mind of one Scotty Young, who you might know from art he did for Marvel's limited Wonderful Wizard of Oz series. Other works that bear Young's name would be Bully Wars, Middle West, The Me You Love in the Dark, and Ain't No Grave. His work on Oz was where he came up with the idea that Dorothy would, quote, be super annoyed by all these characters, unquote. Inspiration to make the main character of I Hate Fairyland, a grown woman stuck with a childlike appearance, came from Young's budding fatherhood, going through the same children's media over and over, right beside his son. And it's not just I Hate Jeff's concept that Young was responsible for. He did the art and writing too. He's pretty much the sole creator of the comic. One might even say, its father? If you're a fan of saturating citizens on the receiving end of grotesque acts of violence, then I recommend this series to you. How many muffin fluffers will get the axe by the hand of Gert? Let's take a look under the daisies and find out. The first issue begins with a young girl named Gertrude who gets spirited away to the picturesque fairyland, an amazing world filled with wonder and magic and laughter and joy, specifically via a floor portal that just opens right up and drops her right through. Here she meets Claudia, the Queen of Fairyland, but don't be fooled by that smile, because this is the one character who could feasibly beat Gert in a match to see who can scream the series name with the most vitriol. Anyway, she'll become the main antagonist, and you'll see how in a hot bit. She sends Gertrude on a quest to find a key that'll get her home with the help of her new guy Larry. Together, the dynamic duo set off to find that MacGuffin and send Gert back to where she came. Little did they know, she'd be so bad at this quest that they'd spend the next 27 years in a sugary hellhole. We're told this by the Moon of all people, who is actually a narrator within the story. After a few barbs shared between the green-haired punk and the giant rock, Gert decides that she's about to show him something proper. And by something proper, she means our first kill. Specifically in the form of blowing up the moon. It'd be more accurate to call this moon a giant head more than a rock, because look at all that blood and organs. He's even got a brain that got blown out. The stylized stars in the sky aren't just sapient in a similar fashion, but horrified by the death of the moon, which Gert and Larry solve by leaving no witnesses, immediately adding more celestial bodies to the pile. We namely see 7 stars get murked, with a leg flying into frame and a splash of blood from off-panel, so I'll count those 2. In the very next panel, we've got 6 more falling stars on display. And if you think 16 deaths sounds crazy so far, you ain't seen nothing yet, because we then cut to Claudia and a bird named Sir Chirpington, looking up at the night sky, which is positively teeming with corpses, coursing and careening like comets. We've got at least 17 on the first panel, 6 more on the third panel, with 1 more star even landing on the Queen's face, and as Claudia looks at the carnage on the balcony, we see the next 10 additions in panels 4 and 5. We're 10 pages in, and we've already tallied 50 carcasses on the board. The star that landed on Claudia's face seemed to have fallen to the ground, and was even named Thaddeus J. Starr in the volume's character In Memoriam. He dies, but not before telling Claudia about the last thing he saw before disaster struck, which would be Gertrude from the sounds of things. And with that, Thaddeus croaks. Godspeed, man. Godspeed. This apparently was the last straw for the Queen, so now she wants Gert's head on a pike. But Chirpington reminds her that as Fairyland's queen, she cannot hurt a guest who enters Fairyland, no matter how much she wants to. But Claudia's not going to call it quits there. Not in a million years. Instead of the Queen herself hurting Gertrude, she could instead hire a hitman to put her on a t-shirt, which old Thunderhead does exactly. And considering the guy for the job she calls has a plethora of body parts and skulls strewn about his home, I'd say he seems perfectly qualified. Meanwhile, Gertrude's robbing a casino and she just about gets away with it until she's zapped by a frog taser. Then she's brought before Sluglord, who's basically a mix between Jabba the Hutt and Flava Flav. When discussing Gert's punishment for theft, Sluglord drops a riddle in the form of sick bars. Gertrude is asked to solve it, and she does so by trying to strangle Jabba the Rappa with his own bling. Before he can breathe his last though, he's able to sick the Shroom Patrol on her. Unfortunately for Sluglord, this leads into our next kill panel, with Gertrude eating the fungus folks alive. We see 4 dead patrolmen on panel, a 5th one off panel and in pieces, and a geyser of blood coming from the background, which implies Shroom Corpse number 6 hiding behind the carnage. Gert flees the scene after an increase in patrolmen gunning after her, so she jumps out of a window where Larry and a flying pig are waiting for her. But because Shroom patrolmen are still Shrooms after all, she's stripping out of her gourd and she starts rambling as the pig takes off with the 2 of them. He only drops her off after she repeatedly says blah 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 for 65 straight miles. It's a good thing though that they were near shore to Ice Cream Island, where Gert pukes off her shroom high. Before she and Larry can set off to try and find their key again, however, they're stopped by Brood the Brutal, the huntsman that Claudia hired. This is where the first issue ends, and we've already got 56 bodies in the pile, which will only get higher from here. Issue number 2 starts us off with a narrator preparing to tell us the story up to this point, only for Gertrude to kill him by crushing him with a full tankard of giggle juice. We then see what happened to Brood. Specifically, he was decapitated by Gertrude with his own axe, as she drunkenly reminisces a couple panels later. We never get to see how that fight went in the series proper, but it does play out from beginning to Brood's end in the Untold Tales of Fairyland side stories, which I do plan on dubbing sometime in the future. Anyway, the not Care Bear barkeep, who I affectionately call Bearkeep, tells Gert she should probably turn in after puppeteering her victim's head like a ventriloquist dummy. She refuses to pay up since she's broke, before attempting to flirt with a frog knight. Understandably, he runs for the hills without a word. Gertrude blames the headless huntsman for scaring off a potential date, only for Larry to point out how she still looks like a kid. She ultimately gets fed up and says that she wishes she could look normal just for one day. And since she's been drinking wishing ale, that wish was granted. Unfortunately, this results in a monkey's paw where a puff of magic turns her into a huge abomination. When Gert clarifies that she wanted to look normal, her tiny friend points out how a typical diet in Fairyland means sugar, sugar, and then some more sugar. This results in a normal Gertrude looking like a walking type 19 diabetic tumor. In short, the average American. Claudia, meanwhile, gets word that her trusted huntsman got hunted instead, so she storms off to enact Plan B, where she asks a tried-and-true witch named Horabella to kill the green-haired punk, which she's very okay with. According to Claudia's intel, Gertrude is heading towards Fawn Valley, and Horabella has just a plan. She gives a local fawn a juicy apple, which turns out to be a cursed brain, turning him into a zombie. Since the brain was cursed, I'd file this to be less of a kill and more of a transformation, and as such, this guy will be filed as cursed rather than dead. Back with Gertrude, she's back to normal, presumably after a day's passed. The duo makes their way through a strangely organic-looking cavern when Larry exclaims that he's found something at last. Our plucky maniac thinks it's the key, but is grossly disappointed after it's revealed to be a lighter that Larry dropped. When they do exit the cave, it turns out to be not a cave, but a dead tickle troll. Oh, sorry, giggle giant, as Larry points out. And as it happens, it's not the only one that Gert's killed. The landscape is trash with them. 6 of them by my count, and each one bears the exact same fatal injury. A torso with a big gaping hole in it. A bit later, our protags stumble upon a brain missing a chunk during the trek to Fawn Valley. The guide tries to be helpful and issue a warning that they should stay away from their destination, to the tune of Gert not finding a single thing wrong with the half-eaten brain. Sure enough, they wind up in Fawn Valley, which definitely looks like it's seen better days. And when they enter the local bar, they see a few zombie fawns feasting on a corpse. We'll count the corpse too since it looks fresh enough. Gertrude takes her new stolen weapon for a test run by chopping up the undead. 3 more kills are added to the count, which is about to balloon into absurdity in a moment. After a triumphant march outside, the entire village looks to be not only zombified, but packed to the brim. Due to the focus on each individual deteriorating and the zombies turning into a mess of green with black scribbles, I'll go ahead and guess that there had to have been at least 300 fawns in this village. This baffling mess of undead heads caps off issue 2. But I'm not going to include every single one of them in this issue's count, since we don't see them die. We begin the next issue in a similar fashion to number 2, with a narrator about to recap the story, only for Gertrude to launch her axe directly into his head, at first thinking him to be a zombie fawn. All of which, in the very next 2-page spread, we learn that Gert has killed, adding them to the count along with the narrator. But then it's brought up that the zombies could just bring themselves back, which Gert isn't having. With a fire-breathing scorchling sprouting from Larry's bowler hat, Fawn Valley is no more, prompting an explosion that Gertrude walks away from in slow motion. Claudia, meanwhile, is not at all happy that a certain half-pint menace escaped unharmed. So she decides to take matters to the highest level, by poofing away to see the great ancient Bark, who holds the Fairyland Council inside his very being. Entry requires a password though, no matter if you're a mighty queen or a lowly chimney sweeper. Luckily, Claudia knows the password by heart. Yeah, I get it. Tell Bark the password. Fine. Pizza. Once inside, she addresses the council, and is about to name-drop the human that's been terrorizing Fairyland for nearly 30 years. But thankfully they know exactly who she means. They tell her that Gert's supposed to keep questing until she finds the key, and the door leading to and from the human world is supposed to be open for just one kid at a time until that quest is done. The queen already knows this, and even states as much. So when the council asks why she's even bothering with the council to begin with, she says that no other guest has been this terrible at the adventure than Gertrude is. Claudia's solution is to invite a new kid to Fairyland so that they can find the key first and go home, which would turn Gert from guest to lifetime citizen, finally allowing the queen to kill her so hard that she dies to death. The council unanimously agrees with this plan. Speaking of Gertrude, she's on the run from a Pokecorn and is about to cross a fallen tree. She is then done dirty a la Wile E. Coyote when the tree just snaps in half right from under her. Hitting the bottom knocks her out so cold for so long that she grows a beard. It could be Fairyland magic, but it turns out she was unconscious for almost a whole day despite night falling, the sun rising, and the seasons passing multiple times. Larry was even able to get married and raise a family while Gert was laid out, before his wife divorced him and took the kids. When she comes to, she meets Happy, the new kid who's on the same key quest as Gertrude. The amount of progress that Happy's made in one day probably surpasses the amount of progress that Gert's made in 27 years. And the Pumpkin Pink is, let's say, none too happy about it. It's unclear if Happy recognizes Gert threatening to treat her to the same fate as Brood, but she blasts her assailant away all the same, and with a rainbow beam attack no less. Gertrude is sent flying through a whole smattering of trees, Happy prances off, and Larry goes to find his designated human. And when he does, it looks as though the Trigger Happy Menace just found herself pushing up daisies. It looks as though. Yeah, despite the grievous injuries, she's still kicking, leading from issue 3 to issue 4. Just like in issue 3, a narrator dies, only at the hands of Larry after revealing that Gert's not dead. Larry might not say it, but that look he has pretty clearly tells us that, as much as he wants to let her bleed out and be done with her, he can't let her die under his watch, so he heals her, but only out of what feels like obligation. Gertrude demands answers, so she decides to access the vanity gate they acquired on their journey, using it as a portal to find Claudia, snatch her from her beauty salon session, and get to questioning. Larry even holding the queen at gunpoint to ensure cooperation. A back and forth between Gert and Claudia leads to the queen getting so agitated that she warns the pint-sized punk that everyone knows to pack a fluffing lunch if they want to go a few rounds with me. One breath-related insult later, and she fires a Dragon Ball Z-esque laser beam of what I can only assume to be electricity, point blank into Gert's face. Due to the laws of Fairyland, however, old Cloudy here is unable to hurt a guest, no matter how much she wants to. At the very least, she tells the miniature menace that she's safe from Claudia's wrath by being a guest. For now. When asked to elaborate on "for now," the Queen answers with a question. I mean, what happens to you if Happy gets to the key first? Before Gert can even begin strangling the monarch, the Fluffhead poofs away, leaving Gert to question Larry about what happens if two guests exist in Fairyland at the same time. He explains that if Happy goes home, that gains the green-haired menace eternal citizenship, and loses her the guest protection spell, meaning Claudia can bring all the harm in the world to her. And when told it'll take something completely impossible to beat Happy to the key, like possessing the power of one of the 7 evil dooms, Gertrude sees it as a challenge. While Happy's making fast and easy progress on her adventure, our leading lady has wound up in the forest of doomed trees, where she adds more kills to the board, using her axe on 4 ravenous rodents and, more assuming here, a combined 50 more are gunned down by Gert and Larry. A grueling travel to the land of not later, and they end up at the door of an evil doom, which is guarded by one skull-killed Bloodbringer. He warns Gertrude to turn back or she'll face his wrath. Unbeknownst to him, she's a far more wrathful person than he ever was, so he ends up pushing up daisies. Upon entering and seeing just how boned out the place is, Gert is practically in love, showing us that it's not the sugar and spice that she finds so nice, but death and gore she'd positively adore. Our intrepid duo then meet Lord Darketh Dead Death, who explains that he knows everything because he allows it to be, and when he decides it should not be, then it will be not. This includes the whole stitch with Happy, and how Gert's going to ask him about borrowing his powers to kill this new rival. Darketh gives her the green light, but only if she can clear his dungeon and prove that she's worthy of wielding all that power. When she makes it in, she comes face to face with the first of her challenges, which turns out to be a giant freaky monster. But just like with Brood and the zombie fawns, we don't get to see it killed, so we won't count it here either. With that, issue number 4 comes to a close. The final issue of the volume begins with Happy's journey about to come to a close, as she finds a key and is brought to the door that'll take her home. The sun delightfully providing narration all the while. Even Queen Claudia's there to congratulate Happy and send her off. But the little tyke isn't quite ready to go just yet. She still has to say goodbye to her guide, Miss Lady. But that one stop for a farewell is all the time needed for a supposed earthquake to rock the scene, and a dragon to burst from the ground and blast the sun to smithereens, mirroring the death of the moon, complete with a brain flying out. Turns out, Gertrude's here to crash the party, and reveals where she got that dark, evil dragon. She completed Darketh Dead Death's dungeon after all, a flashback montage displaying 4 total monsters, including the one from the end of issue 4, so we'll add those to the count. Darketh not only upheld his end of the bargain, but was even pleased with Gert's onslaught, granting her super evil kill you so hard powers. Meanwhile, Happy still has the key and is more than willing to fight back. Unfortunately for her, Gert's new power-up allows her to completely negate the retaliation. Afterwards, Gertrude opens up the ground, lets her rival fall in, and shuts it right up, putting an end to Happy's quest. She may be pushing up daisies, but Gertrude's picking up the key that was left behind. After all this time, the door is finally opened, and Gertrude is more than ready to step on through and go home. But when Claudia chimes in that the send-off could use more depth, our hair-trigger protag is delighted to oblige. Larry begs her not to go through with it, but it's too late. With a raise of Gert's arms, Claudia is reduced to bones and ash and, like Happy and so many others, put under the daisies, giving us the final death of the volume. While Gertrude celebrates the death of the Queen, the door locks shut behind her, and the key vanishes, prompting her to ask her guide what's going on.
What the? The key? No! Where'd it go, Larry? What's going on? Why can't I go home?
Upon the death of the king or queen, the one who deals the fatal blow must take up the crown and become the queen of
Fluffing Fairyland.
By the time Gert dons the crown, we find a grand sum of 418 corpses left behind, with only 4 of said stiffs being narrators. If only she had taken some time to crack open 2 more skulls, then we'd have a really funny number. So a quick addendum here, as I was beginning to put the audio together, I realized that when Claudia calls Brood, he has a pair of heads on his desk, and they look very fresh. So it looks like we got our funny number after all. The medal for Prettiest Daisy goes to the death of the moon, which is such an iconic moment in the franchise, period. So much so that it makes up the back of the volume's cover art. The funniest bit? This isn't even the only time in the series that the moon gets messed up. If you pay attention to the background, you can even see the moon all bandaged up during the zombie fawn fiasco. The unenviable title of Saddest Sapling, however, goes to the zombie fawns, without a doubt. They're so hard to count and they gel together so much that I just gave up on giving a solid number. So I just threw a dart at a board. Figuratively anyway. Now then, the issue that has the most kills is number 3 with 301, thanks to all the aforementioned zombies, plus a narrator. As for the smallest body count, it's number 5, with only 5, fittingly enough, despite being so climactic. By the end of the month of initial release, the first issue alone sold a pretty golden 50,000 copies, which, if you ask me, sounds not too shabby. In total, 20 issues were put out, summing up to 4 volumes. Later on in 2022, a revival series came along, with another 4 volumes that also consisted of 20 issues as a whole. The revival received mixed results, including from me. But to this day, a decade later, I Hate Fairyland is still going strong, undoubtedly with an entire planet's worth of cadavers in its wake. If you enjoy violent fun in a world of chaos where nothing makes sense, I personally recommend picking up the series. Even the newer run, starting with issue number 41, is worth it. I am Alp Clown Miser the 36, and I will most likely be back with yet another dub of the comic. Oh yeah, speaking of which...
Happy 10th anniversary to I Hate Fairyland, Muffin Fluffers! I look forward to laying waste to the sugary sweet spithole for 10 years more. Actually, no, I just want to go home.